The rain-soaked forest of the Battle of Hürtgen Forest echoed with the steady drip of misery on 12th of November 1944, hidden in the Western Front's worst jungle of minefields and gunfire, lay a wounded American soldier crying out from a patch of no man's land beside the Wild Sow anti-tank minefield. According to the German war diary of the 275th Infantry Division, at around 10:30 a.m., Leutnant Friedrich Lengfeld heard the mortal plea and ordered his men, no fire on approaching medics. Across the hedge and wire, the Americans believed the forest to be an impregnable wrecking ground. U.S. records estimate 33,000 casualties in the campaign alone. On the German side, the 275th had dug in and expected to repel every advance. On 12th of November, they held their ground, yet one of their officers broke protocol. Lengfeld formed a Red Cross-vested rescue team, leading it into his own minefield to reach the wounded enemy. He stepped on a mine and died of his wounds in a field hospital at Freudsheim. That a German company commander would risk his life to save an American rifleman in the heart of one of WW2's bloodiest forests shatters the conventional narrative of battlefield hate. So how did this moment of self-sacrificing humanity emerge from the chaos of war? To understand the incredible context the military records show, we must first descend into the dark timber, the tangled mud, and the unrelenting cost of the forest. By the first week of November 1944, the German 275th Volksgrenadier Division believed the Hürtgen Forest itself would fight on their side. Its war diary, preserved in the Bundesarchiv, recorded, "The woods are our fortress. No American will pass." General Hans Schmidt's headquarters at Düren had reinforced every trail with mines, tripwires, and overlapping sniper nests. Each platoon counted a handful of veteran Eastern Front marksmen. Their scoped Carabiner 98K rifles zeroed for 200 meters, the maximum line of sight beneath the canopy. Confidence was sustained by recent success. In October, the division had bled the U.S. 9th Infantry Division White near Germata, claiming 600 casualties in a single week. Weather added to German faith. Fog limited Allied air power, while constant rain turned Sherman tanks into bogged hulks. Luftwaffe meteorological reports logged visibility under 60 yards, ideal for ambush. Intercepted signals, later declassified by the British Ultra program, caught officers boasting that the forest is impregnable. Our snipers rule the paths. For exhausted Lanzer, propaganda leaflets promised a defensive miracle. Who holds the Hürtgen holds the fatherland. Even dwindling rations recorded at 1,200 calories per man per day were accepted as proof of sacrifice for a righteous cause, yet behind that confidence lay quiet desperation. Division strength had fallen below 8,000 men, half-authorized numbers, and ammunition deliveries arrived by horse cart. Still, morale bulletins sent to Army Group B on 11th November declared high spirit and unbroken faith. When Lengfeld's second company occupied positions near the Karl Trail, his snipers covered every approach with pre-registered fire. They believed any American movement meant certain death. The 275th Volksgrenadiers expected to defend forever. What they could not foresee was that one of their own officers would defy that doctrine. According to subsequent testimonies, Lengfeld's compassion, not Allied firepower, would breach the line first. While German records proclaimed their fortress secure, U.S. archives reveal American units entering those same woods with little sense of what awaited them. For the Americans entering the Hürtgen in early November 1944, confidence evaporated within hours. The 28th Infantry Division's after-action report recorded visibility less than 30 yards, and movement reduced to a crawl under ceaseless artillery and sniper fire. Major General Norman D. Cotter, already famous for Omaha Beach, confided in his field notebook, "We are fighting the forest itself." Each battalion advanced scarcely a mile a day, terrain and weather-shredded radio lines, leaving units isolated in a maze of mud and trees. Materially, the U.S. troops were outmatched by the environment. The Quartermaster General's log shows that by 10th of November, half of the division's vehicles were immobilized by churned clay roads, rifles jammed from grit, medics rationed morphine, and supply trains sank axle deep. Compared with the German defenders' pre-sighted bunkers, American fire support was blind. Forward observers could not see their own shell bursts. One soldier wrote home, "You hear the shells, but never the men who fired them." Morale fell as sharply as the temperature. A survey from 1st U.S. Army's psychological branch estimated combat exhaustion at 25%, 1 in 4 men near collapse. Even Cotter questioned the plan, telling his staff on 11 November, "If this is victory, God save us from defeat." Yet beneath that despair, small groups adapted. Engineers converted tank dozers into makeshift ambulances. Riflemen learned to listen for German loading clicks before firing. This ingenuity, recorded in Division G2 logs, hints at a stubborn will that statistics cannot measure. The 28th entered Hurtgen expecting routine forest clearing. Instead, it met the costliest small-area battle in U.S. Army history, 33,000 casualties by winter's end. Still, among those battered ranks walked officers and enlisted men whose endurance would outlast strategy itself. But as official reports show, amid this chaos, a few commanders conceived a plan to break the forest's curse, not with force, but with resolve. Behind the misery of the Hürtgen front, American staff officers were already rewriting the doctrine of forest warfare. Classified memoranda from V Corps headquarters reveal experiments in precision counter-sniper tactics, quietly tested while the main infantry fought blind. The Ordnance Department had rushed forward a handful of experimental M3 carbine sniper scopes, primitive infrared night-sighting units powered by backpack batteries, Technical Manual TM 59340, October 1944, notes that the prototypes were evaluated by elements of the 9th and 28th Divisions near Schmidt. Visibility 0. Scope effective at 70 yards, one test summary reads, proving that even in blackout conditions the Americans sought a technological edge. Innovation extended beyond weapons. Signal Corps engineers deployed sound ranging and flash spotting teams, triangulating muzzle bursts through oscillograph traces, techniques later refined for Korea. Declassified OSS Field Report 19/11/44 described mobile camouflage nets laced with scrap foil to confuse German optics. Logistics officers turned lumber from wrecked farmhouses into footbridges. Medical units converted tank dozers to evacuation sleds. These improvisations, meticulously logged in Quartermaster Record Q471, demonstrate an adaptability unmatched by the entrenched German system. At divisional level, Cotter's staff assembled composite hunter teams, 2 scouts, 1 radioman, 1 marksman, trained to crawl 200 yards past the line at dusk and report bunker coordinates. An entry in the 28th Infantry G3 Journal, 14 of, recorded hunter teams operating effectively, morale lifted by initiative. While higher commands questioned results, these small units represented a doctrinal pivot from attrition to agility. Intelligence also improved. U.S. Signal Intelligence Service intercepts captured German artillery frequencies, allowing direction finding of command posts. For the first time, artillery fires were plotted by radio triangulation instead of map estimation. The combination of electronic ears, makeshift optics, and sheer ingenuity began to offset the terrain's tyranny. These innovations, however, were born of desperation. The V Corps Operations Review later admitted, necessity, not foresight, produced our forest tactics. Yet those improvised doctrines, integrating technology, intelligence, and small unit creativity, would influence the U.S. Army's post-war field manuals. Amid these clandestine adaptations, a human drama unfolded. One German officer, Friedrich Lengfeld, would act from compassion, not calculation, and achieve what no American device could measure. As declassified documents chart America's tactical evolution, Captured German diaries reveal a moment when one man's conscience defied every order. The final days before 12th of November 1944 were ruled by fog. U.S. Meteorological Section File WX-28 recorded visibility under 30 meters, rain continuous, the wind nil. German observers of the 275th Volksgrenadier Division noted the same blindness in their diary. Forest sealed in mist, enemy unseen but near. Within that vapor, both armies groped for position. Lengfeld's 2nd Company of the 275th Infantry Regiment occupied a line north of the Kull Trail, a twisting mule path descending to the stream that divided the opposing forces. According to the company roll, his men fortified a farmhouse dubbed Kull Bunker, stringing tripwires and planting Schumann 42 devices around the perimeter. Snipers sighted along forest tracks that the Americans would later nickname Murder Road. Across the ravine, the U.S. 28th Infantry Division was shifting into attack formations. Orders of 11 November directed the 112th Regiment to advance toward Schmidt at first light. G3 logs show that radios malfunctioned in the damp. Runners carried messages through shellfire, and several never returned. Artillery liaison notes recorded firing by map only, no visibility for observers. Supply columns moved at night, headlights blacked out, guided by white cloth strips pinned to trees. At 09 hours on 12th of November, Lengfeld's forward scouts reported enemy groaning in minefield. The war diary confirms the entry at 10:30, wounded American crying out. Under doctrine, no movement was permitted into mined ground. Yet Lengfeld ordered, prepare stretcher, no fire on medics. His men protested. The forest was still under mortar fire. Lengfeld, wearing a Red Cross armband, led the rescue detail through the mist. American patrols on the opposite ridge heard the explosion minutes later, but never knew its cause. Only post-war testimony from survivors revealed that a German officer had fallen while trying to save their comrade. According to both U.S. and German logs, the next entries record silence, a brief cease in killing that preceded one of the most haunting minutes in the forest's history. At 10:30 a.m. on 12th November 1944, the Hürtgen Forest fell eerily silent. Rain drifted between shattered trunks as faint cries, "Medic! Help me!" rose from the minefield dividing the lines. Both sides heard them. U.S. medical logs of the 112th Regiment note a wounded rifleman stranded beyond reach of litter bearers. German reports in the 275th Division diary record enemy calling from own minefield, still alive. Most units ignored such voices. Movement meant death. Inside a stone farmhouse north of the Kull Trail, Leutnant Friedrich Lengfeld listened. The 26-year-old company commander, veteran of Normandy and the Eastern Front, had already lost half his men that week. Corporal Heinz Becker remembered him saying, "We cannot let him die there screaming like that." Against standing orders, Lengfeld gathered 8 soldiers, tore a Red Cross flag from a ration sack and fixed it to a stick. He pulled on a medic's armband, told his men not to fire, and stepped into the mist. The ground was littered with Schumann 42s, wood-cased anti-personnel mines invisible under the sludge. Witness Gefreiter Otto Schröder testified in 1953 that Lengfeld advanced barely 10 meters before a muffled detonation flung him backward. Shrapnel pierced his abdomen. Fragments struck 2 of the stretcher-bearers. They dragged him out under sporadic shell fire. Becker recalled, he was calm. He said only, "Keep trying for the American." Across the line, U.S. observers saw figures moving with a flag, but could not interpret the scene. When the shelling resumed, they assumed a retrieval of wounded Germans. Only after the war would they learn the truth from captured records and a surviving member of Lengfeld's platoon interrogated by U.S. G2. Officers Lengfeld died that afternoon in the Divisional Field Hospital at Pforzheim. His last entry in the 275th log reads, Lieutenant Lengfeld fallen during rescue attempt. No further detail. For decades, his act was known only among his men until 1994. when veterans of the 22nd U.S. Infantry, having discovered the German diary, erected a stone at Hurtgen. He was the enemy, but he was a man. That inscription, now weathered by the same rain that fell on 12th of November, marks the precise spot where hatred paused. One order, one explosion, one life traded for another. The war's smallest ceasefire measured in seconds and compassion. Official reports on both sides list Lengfeld's death as minor action. Yet historians agree it was the most human moment in the most inhuman battle. The day after Leutnant Lengfeld's death, the 275th Volksgrenadier Division's war diary recorded only, Company Commander Lengfeld killed while aiding wounded enemy. Buried in Freudsheim. Yet behind that terse entry lay a collapse of confidence no statistics could measure. His platoon sergeant, Heinz Becker, later told Allied interrogators, "After that, men began to talk quietly that this war had gone mad. Morale." Reports sent from the division to LXXX Corps on 14 November reflected fatigue and growing indifference. One officer noted that soldiers who witnessed the rescue attempt refused orders to fire on wounded Americans during subsequent skirmishes. The Gestapo field detachment at Düren opened an inquiry, filed as Vorlaufakte 14244, but witnesses simply claimed fog prevented observation. By mid-month, the regiment's rate of self-inflicted wounds had doubled. Across the lines, U.S. patrols discovered the minefield strewn with German bandages and a single Red Cross scrap. No one knew its meaning until February 1945, when captured documents confirmed the identity of the fallen German officer. First Army Psychological Branch memoranda described the story spreading through the ranks. Enemy lieutenant dies rescuing GI. For soldiers hardened by weeks of slaughter, it sounded like myth. Chaplain Francis Lammers of the 112th Regiment wrote home, "If true, then somewhere out there God still moves in this mud." To Lengfeld's surviving men, his death symbolized futility. Private Otto Schroeder later told German historians, "He was brave in Normandy and died for an American he never met. The forest took everything, except his honor." Within days, their sector crumbled under renewed U.S. artillery barrages. By early December, the 275th was reduced to fewer than 3,000 effectives, withdrawn behind the Ruhr. The division's retreat marked the end of any illusion that faith or fortification could save the Western Front. Lengfeld's defiance, once whispered as weakness, became the one memory his soldiers carried home unashamed. Strategic maps labeled the episode irrelevant, yet intelligence reports soon showed its echo reaching both armies, altering morale more than any shell could. By late November 1944, Lengfeld's death had already entered rumor. U.S. First Army Psychological Warfare Branch compiled an unsigned memorandum dated 6th of November 1944. Report circulated among infantry that a German officer rescued an American from his own minefield. Moral effect, positive. The document urged restraint. If authentic, story should be used sparingly. Truth has greater influence than propaganda. It was. Within days, Stars and Stripes correspondents mentioned a strange mercy in the Hürtgen, though censors deleted the name. Inside the crumbling German lines, however, the episode spread faster. Army Group B morale sheets for 30th November record increased discussion of officer who died aiding find. Even as Goebbels's broadcasts insisted that mercy toward the enemy was treason, frontline chaplains quietly invoked Lengfeld in sermons. One Wehrmacht pastor wrote, "He showed we may die human." At headquarters, the event coincided with a grim strategic reckoning. By early December, the 275th Volksgrenadier Division had lost 3/4 of its strength. Army Group B reported it no longer a tactical unit. American analysts interpreted the moral erosion as a symptom of collapse. Enemy willingness to aid foe reflects disintegration of combat discipline. Yet within the U.S. ranks, The same act became proof that decency still breathed amid the carnage. Chaplain Lammers's field diary, preserved in the AHEC collection, notes on 1st December, "A German gave his life for one of ours. Men talk of it as a miracle." Historians later observed that both sides used the story to serve different needs, one to explain defeat, the other to reclaim humanity from victory. But contemporary correspondence shows something subtler. The rumor reduced hatred. A December survey by the 1st Army Information Section found a measurable decline in soldiers' willingness to kill prisoners compared with the October average. Even propaganda could not achieve that. Declassified intelligence files reveal that long after guns fell silent, this brief act of compassion continued to reshape how both armies remembered the forest and themselves. In the decades following 1945, the story of Leutnant Friedrich Lengfeld might have vanished with his unit's papers had American veterans not returned to the Hurtgen. When the 22nd U.S. Infantry Regiment revisited the battlefield in 1994, they discovered the German diary entry noting an officer killed attempting to rescue an American. Astonished, the veterans commissioned a granite stone at the Hürtgen War Cemetery reading, "He was the enemy, but he was a man." It remains the only monument erected by American soldiers in a German military graveyard. German historians quickly re-examined divisional records. Bundesarchiv oral file B17 preserves interviews with former comrades who confirmed every detail of the rescue. One recalled, "He died doing what he thought soldiers should do, protect life, not just take it." For post-war Germany, the episode offered a counter-narrative to decades of guilt, a proof that moral courage could survive the regime's dehumanization. In 1965, the Federal Republic's Defense Ministry cited Lengfeld in its officer ethics curriculum, listing him beside Klaus von Stauffenberg as an example of innere Führung, leadership guided by conscience. Across the Atlantic, U.S. Army War College instructors later integrated the case into their course, Moral Courage Under Fire. The syllabus states, Lengfeld's defiance of lawful orders to perform an unlawful omission, letting a man die, embodies ethical duty beyond nationality. Students still debate whether his action represents heroism or tragedy, yet all agree it defines the grey frontier between obedience and humanity. For battlefield historians, Lengfeld's choice also reframed the Hürtgen campaign. Charles B. MacDonald concluded that amid a battle fought without purpose, one German's mercy gave it meaning. Anthony Beevor's Ardennes 1944 echoes the sentiment, calling the act a solitary victory of conscience in a campaign of futility. The story's endurance rests on documentation. No legend, it survives in typed reports, casualty lists and coordinates. Each generation rediscovers it because it defies simplification, proof that humanity can persist even inside total war's machinery. Official. Historians conclude that Lengfeld's death changed nothing strategically, yet in moral reckoning it altered everything. His legacy endures wherever soldiers study the cost of obedience and the price of mercy. Military records prove that even inside one of World War II's bleakest campaigns, compassion could still pierce the smoke. Leutnant Friedrich Lengfeld's act on 12th of November 1944 left no strategic trace on maps, yet its moral imprint outlasted divisions and regimes. The German 275th Volksgrenadier Division vanished in the ruin of the Western Front. The 28th U.S. Infantry marched on toward the Rhine. Only this single entry endures in both their archives. Officer killed attempting rescue of enemy. Historians now read that line as more than a footnote. It bridges two adversaries once sworn to annihilate each other. At the Hürtgen Memorial, American and German veterans have gathered for 3 decades beneath the inscription, "He was the enemy, but he was a man." The stone marks not victory or defeat, but a boundary where obedience ended and humanity began. In 1999, the U.S. Army War College taught Lengfeld's decision as a case in ethical disobedience, while the Bundeswehr adopted it into its innere Führung curriculum, a joint legacy. Neither nation planned, yet both now claim. For viewers and researchers alike, the story forces a reckoning. In every war there are orders and there are choices. Lengfeld's order violated his duty. His choice fulfilled a higher one. He crossed into a minefield not for glory, but because a stranger's suffering outweighed ideology. That is the measure of leadership the archives cannot quantify. As Charles MacDonald wrote, amid senseless slaughter, one man's mercy gave the battle meaning. 79 years later, his grave still draws silent visitors from both armies. They stand not to mourn a German or an American, but a human being who proved that conscience can survive even when civilization does not. Military history proves, even in war's darkest forest, the greatest victory is to remain human.